I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time. And so far, you haven't disappointed.
John Wick
Chapter 3.
Parabellum. Keanu Reeves returns as the Baba Yaga, the boogeyman, the myth, the legend. Watch as he kills people with a shoe, or a piece of lint, or the oxygen around them. It could happen. The John Wick trilogy is one of the more fascinating success stories of recent memory. The first film was just something that kinda came out of nowhere, starring an actor whose last movie was 47 Ronin. It made a decent, though not groundbreaking amount of money, but the positive reception from both critics and audiences made Lionsgate realize they might have something here. And they were right. I thoroughly enjoyed the John Wick duology before this. The action, the choreography, the cinematography, the world building, Keanu Reeves' performance, it all adds up to be solid ass entertainment. So you bet I was anticipating the third coming of Wick. Now that he's excommunicado since the ending of the second, he's about to crack open a can of Smack Daddy on a legion of unsuspecting amateurs compared to him. And now, having bared witness to the third tirade of the Baba Yaga, I can safely say he did indeed smack some daddies, but I'm not entirely sure if it was as entertaining this time around. There are definitely great things about it, of course. Keanu Reeves is still great as usual. This is kind of a perfect role for him. I'm sure we've all made some kind of joke about past performances he did, granted with some justification.
I want to get out of this rat hole. I want to get online. I need a computer.
Why I feel this role works so well for him is the combination of anger and tranquility. Reeves is really good at suppressing emotion, which makes whenever he does display some sort of strong feeling, usually rage, all the more potent. Even then, he's not a straight up zombie all the time either. He displays sadness and grief whenever appropriate, and he does have good banter with people he knows.
You're not very good at retiring.
I'm working on it.
The action choreography is once again the coolest shit I've ever seen. There's a part where he throws knives and swords at people, and like, the speed of the sequence, as well as the number of swords and knives is just insane. Like, wow. You also see him kill a man with a book. Yeah. Wasn't exaggerating that opening by much. Another thing this whole trilogy gets right are the character relationships. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but the other thing established since the beginning, apart from being a force to reckon with, is that John Wick's clearly a man who gets around. Not in the way I phrased it, but a lot of people know him and usually respect him, strongly indicating that there's a far bigger history of this character that we know of. One of my favorite scenes from this was fairly early on when he visits his doctor to help him stitch up a wound. That doctor character only appears in that one scene, but with such little time they establish this loyalty and relationship between the two. Later on when he talks to people like Angelica Houston or Halle Berry, they're a little more hostile towards him, especially Berry, but there is something in the past that put them in his debt, having to help him. We don't know exactly what it is, but it honestly doesn't matter. The concierge gets in on the action. I have nothing meaningful to add to that other than I'm glad he's given more of a spotlight. That guy's cool. Lawrence Fishburne too. So everything seems to be in order for a good John Wick movie. We got the action, the acting, characters, and stuff. Why do I feel like it's lacking in something? What is the something that it's lacking in? I did a little thinking about it, and I believe I could chalk it up to 3 somethings that make it feel somewhat inferior to the other 2. The first are the villains. Now what's funny is, you can make the same argument to the first film, as that didn't really have the most formidable foes. Just some Russian gangster and his idiot son. But I'd argue that they serve a purpose to introduce Wick's expertise to the audience, as well as telling them not to fuck with him, specifically don't steal his car, don't kill his dog, do either of those things, you're at a one-way ticket to pencil shanking.
I could kill anyone in this room with a pencil.
You really couldn't.
First film's baddies just don't know what they're getting themselves into. Chapter Dose, however, kicks things up a notch by introducing threats who know who they're facing against, and the concept of blood promises, something even Wick has to abide to. And now we got radder baddies, such as this smug little shit who loves pushing the buttons of the boogeyman, his crime lord sister who has like one scene but leaves a surprisingly strong impression, the meat-suited lady who's just cool in general, and Common, who falls down the stairs a bunch with him. Like, these are legit memorable characters. And now that they're not here, how's Chapter Trez gonna top them? Well, it doesn't. The villains here are really meh. Like, we got this awkward fanboy who fights him. I mean, sure, he has skills and all, but there's nothing remotely opposing about him. There's also this one crime lord assassin who appeared, but then gets his ass handed to him. He did this one thing, but other than that, he just kind of exists. the adjudicator person, which I want to talk briefly about their acting skills, because I don't know about you, but I found their performance kind of weird. I can't tell if it's how they were being directed or how they chose to play the character. I'm not really sure what to make of them at all, to be honest. Although I know I just didn't care. I find these scenes to all be sorta whatever. They have no lasting impression on me. Even if it has been a while since I've seen the other two, I still remember the antagonists. They had sort of an oomph to them, you know? The second thing that was kinda lacking were the action scenes. Now wait a minute, didn't you just praise the action? I praised the action choreography, which is still a major highlight. No one was lacking in that area, but the set pieces, for the most part, weren't as interesting or creative. There were a few that are, like the aforementioned sword scene, as well as the other parts involving motorcycles and dogs. Yes, dogs. But there are other parts, especially the climax, that felt like there's no variety to them. You remember the nightclub scene in the first and how fast and kinetic that felt? Or the climax of the second with the Hall of Mirrors and how cool and interesting that looked? Those had standout scenes in them. This has standout moments, but not necessarily scenes. Maybe the dog part, I don't know. And the last thing that I didn't care much for, and this may be kind of a personal preference, but the story felt a little too convoluted. I'm not saying you shouldn't take risks making a sequel. In fact, I applaud franchises for trying something a little bit out of their comfort zone for future installments. But in the case of John Wick, the thing I liked best about the stories were how simple they were. They didn't need to overburden you with a bunch of details. All you need to know is, there's an assassin who suffered a personal loss. He suffers another one and he can't take it anymore. He gets forcibly pulled back into a job he tried to retire. He did something against the rules, so now he's facing consequences. The simplicity works for the franchise because it carries everything else. The world building, the grief that Wick faces. I like how in this movie, Wick's at his most vulnerable position yet. Everyone's out to kill him. He's desperate for help, but there's not a lot of people to turn to. That's a particularly great concept for this sequel, but I felt that all the pathos this could have had gets overburdened by unnecessary plot details and superfluous progression. There's like 4 scenes of him begging to people and a few others involving him being put through some sort of torture in exchange. There were also too many scenes involving characters being lectured over something. It's usually many of the scenes involving the adjudicator, especially when going over the rules of the Continental. Do we really need to go over that many? I was honestly kind of bored at parts, which was not a reaction I expected to have at all. Also, this might be a spoiler, but I doubt I'm giving that much away. I thought this was going to be the last installment of a trilogy, but no, there's a sequel hook. I mean, of course I'm interested to see it. There's enough good parts in this for me to come back to. But if this is the direction the franchise is going to go, I'm not sure how excited I am for future installments. I do love the action scenes and several of the main characters, and the world building was fascinating to me, but it's starting to feel like it's overtaking the plot. I mean, what do I know? Maybe people really wanted this. I mean, I kinda did, but I don't think I'll remember this as fondly as 1 and 2. But if you're still into the franchise and all that, yeah, check it out. It's still a reasonably solid time. 6 out of 10. I'm glad Keanu's a major star again. He's a good boy.
Oh, we got puppy pee. Oh, it's playing the puppy pee. No, we're not gonna play in the puppy pee. 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 Puppy pee.